Aperture.
Hello, thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Michael Famighetti. I'm the editor of Aperture magazine. For those of you who are not familiar with Aperture, it was founded in 1952 by a group of artists, writers, and curators as common ground for photography. Aperture today is a multi-platform publisher that unites the photography community in print, in person, and online. Tonight, we are very, very excited to be joined by Nigel Poor, Earlonne Woods, and Rachel Kushner to celebrate two incredible books. The San Quentin Project, published by Aperture this past spring, which collects images from a vast historical archive at San Quentin State Prison and demonstrates how those photos were used in Nigel's workshop inside the prison to explore various ways of thinking about pictures, storytelling, and personal experience. Nigel, with her collaborator Earlonne Woods, has also just released This Is Ear Hustle, published by Crown, a book based on their powerful podcast, the first of its kind created and produced in a prison, which features stories of the daily realities of life inside San Quentin, shared by those living there. Tonight's discussion will be moderated by the fantastic writer Rachel Kushner. Kushner is the author of the novels The Mars Room, The Flamethrowers, and Telex from Cuba, as well as a book of short stories, The Strange Case of Rachel K. Her most recent book, The Hard Crowd, Essays 2000 to 2020, was published last spring. She has been a finalist for the Booker Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award, among many other honors. We were also very privileged to have Kushner contribute an essay to the San Quentin Project publication. Which you can see here and which you can purchase from Aperture's site. And the Ear Hustle book can be purchased from Crown. So we're very excited to have Nigel, Earlonne, and Rachel here tonight with us. Aperture is a not-for-profit, so I also want to thank some of our funders. Tonight's program, which is actually produced in conjunction with Crown Publishing, is supported in part by generous donations from Aperture's Board of Trustees, our members, and other individuals. Aperture's programs are made possible in part by the New York State Council on the Arts, with support from the New York State Legislature. The San Quentin Project and associated programming was made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Arts. Please be sure to put any questions you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the evening. And now I'd like to hand it over to Rachel Kushner. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Michael. Sorry, just hi everyone. I'm Rachel Kushner. Thanks for that introduction. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with and interviewing the great Earlonne Woods and Nigel Poor. These two people, in my opinion, are the best interviewers working in media today. So I'm pretty nervous to interview them. And I thought that maybe I could just start off by asking them for a little bit of advice that they might give me for interviewing, because I really do consider them to be the pros. Like, if you could just kind of narrow it down to one or two key tricks that allow you both to be such gifted listeners, what would it be?
Oh, E, you gonna go first?
Yeah, I would say watching Nigel at work.
Find the right partner. Okay, this might surprise you. First, know your own badassery. Know that you're going in with a curious mind and that you have something to offer the person you're speaking to, which is your curiosity and your presence. And that you know going in, you are going to create the best atmosphere for that person to be present for you and for you to be present for them. So I think you get in that frame of mind, and then it's easy.
So it's like confidence, like what people call speaking it into being, right?
Yeah, some confidence, but knowing it, because you want to be there. You're really curious. You want to know, and you want you want that person to feel almost like you are, not in a weird way, like you are holding their hand and you are walking together through either difficult or beautiful terrain, and you're going to be there with them no matter what they say. And people feel it. You know, and then when it doesn't go that way, you feel it too. Like, you know, I mean, you know, pretty much, it's like a date, you know, right away, this is something I want to get further into, or, okay, I gotta go. Not that I've dated in 20 years, but anyway, that's what I imagine dating is like.
Earlonne, do you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree with that. Like, you know, especially, you know, sitting up with Nigel, sometimes or even when I'm out of Nigel presence and I be sitting there interviewing a person, I can say to myself, yeah, this is a Nigel moment right here, to come and ask him about the minutia of something, you know? But I think it's just really, you know, just having an open conversation. You know, most of the people that I talk to are really open, whether it's with their feelings, emotions, and, you know, they open. So, you know, when I ask a question, sometimes we get a deep answer because, you know, one, people probably just don't ask those questions, you know? So I think it's just really just sitting down and not even making it an interview, just making it just a conversation. And I think that's the best part.
Yeah. You guys work really well together as a team. I mean, that's got to be some part of it. But reading the transcripts from the interviews that made it into this amazing book, this is Ear Hustle, and listening to episodes again, and also you have all the transcripts, I think, are on your website. Looking at all of that again, I started to notice patterns. Like, it seems to me that your style of asking questions is slightly different, like what you're listening for. Nigel seems to kind of just go there with people, asking very personal questions. Which isn't to say that, Earlonne, you're not also sometimes asking personal questions, but I feel more like you're kind of listening to the conversation that Nigel will have with the subject and then kind of intervening to deepen it, you know, or maybe even say something more that Nigel didn't say. And she's the one who's kind of going in. But then there are moments when it seems like you kind of notice a more subtle hitch when somebody like is overcome with emotion. And then Earlonne will go, what's going on with that? I don't know. It's maybe like having a partner is very powerful in the sense that you're not going to miss those golden opportune moments. When I think about interviewing and I hear you guys, I go, oh, that's how you do it, because they say, well, tell me more about that. Well, how does that work? And it's so important to keep listening and asking questions, because otherwise you stay kind of slightly, you know, uneducated about what somebody's talking about. No?
That's a very good depiction, I believe, of what we do in the interviewing room.
Yeah, and also important to know when to just let a silence hang and let somebody give them the space to answer, and it can be kind of awkward. But I think, I don't know how many people have an interview partner, but it makes it wonderful because, I mean, Earlonne, you could speak to this too. I never feel unsafe. Like I always know someone has my back, and I hope Earlonne feels the same way. Like we intuitively, and I can't explain why, intuitively we seem to understand how the other thinks and where they're going to go. I'm sure Earlonne has a pretty good idea of what questions I'm going to ask, and I sometimes know what he's going to ask. And you're right, sometimes he'll pick up on the smallest little detail and just like it like goes in and also is expansive at the same time. And I can think of examples of those if you want one.
Do you guys ever feel like there's certain things that I don't know, places where you're not going to go, or you end up going there and you feel like, to put it quite bluntly, like it's not good for the cause? I mean, does that kind of stuff come up?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to how contrabands get into prison, how people make weapons, we don't go there because this, you know, you have the media for that one.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we just try
That's
to stick
right.
to the everyday life, you know, aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't think we disagree on this, though I may have a stronger desire to start telling more stories with people who aren't always so likable. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just always tell stories that make everyone in prison look like they're amazing, because just like on the outside, there's all kinds of people in there. And so Earlonne could answer. I don't know if I'm more into doing that than you are. I'm not sure. I mean, we do it occasionally, but I feel like personally we need to do that a little bit more.
Indeed. No, definitely. I think, it's a trip when you putting this story together, and you may have an arc to it. And, the best part is when of course you can't predict the end of it, and it's a whole different, it might not, like I say, it might not be the most coolest ending, but it's what it is. It's the story, it's the reality of it. And it might be jarring, it might be what people don't expect. And when we get to that point, I'll be like, cool, ain't nobody expecting that ending. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I would imagine also for you, I mean, if you know what shape you want something to be, then the interview subject is just kind of plugged in there rather than sort of telling you
Well,
what.
sometimes it don't go the way in your mind. It don't never go that way. You have to try to get it to go that way, or let a person speak their mind. And like I say, sometimes when we start out interviewing a person, the story end up totally different than we imagine.
How many hours do you guys interview somebody for, and then cutting it down to the size of an episode? I mean, I wouldn't just, it sounds like the sound design is so intricate and incredible. And it's really like the only podcast that I can tolerate, because the rest of them are too kind of casual and conversational, and Ear Hustle's so tight. But I would imagine that there's a lot that goes into that, and that you're interviewing people for probably
Hours.
multiple sessions, hours.
Are
Yeah,
you talking about when we started or today?
we've gotten better. When we started, our interviews were like 4-6 hours, like way too long.
And that's probably also taking care of the interview subject, because once somebody opens up about something, they probably have things they want to share, and they'll be done when they're done. Is that also part of it, or?
We do speak to some people multiple times, sometimes 3 or 4 times, depending on the story. And especially if it starts to go in a direction we didn't expect. Now, when we were in prison, it was actually much easier to do that because people weren't going anywhere. And so we would have people come back multiple times. On the outside, it's a little more difficult to get people to come to the studio. So we try to do it in one interview, though sometimes it takes a couple of interviews. But I do think over the 4 years, Earlonne, we've been doing this, we've gotten better at interviews, at being more targeted with our interviews while still leaving room for the unknown.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but for some reason I don't know the answer. Is there a way that people inside can listen to the podcast?
Yes. The podcast is in California prisons are put up on the closed circuit TV stations, and it's actually broadcast from the headquarters of CDCR out to all the prisons. So everybody get to hear it. When we first started, it was pretty much just in San Quentin, but we were able to get it into all the prisons.
Yeah, in any prison that wants to get it, it gets played in a few prisons in Alabama and Indiana, and I can't remember where else we get contacted by it. If any prison is interested, we'll get it to them. And for the first prison system to pick it up was actually in the UK. And it plays in 114 prisons in the UK, which was shocking to us that it was there before we could get it into the CDCR.
Well, that's not surprising to me, just based on my own experiences, because when I've gone to the UK on book tour, I'm invited into prisons and they give people inside the book, and we have these reading groups, and that would never happen in California. I mean, even prisons like Chowchilla and Salinas Valley and Pelican Bay, they're broadcasting Ear Hustle.
Definitely. It's like, I think it's like some down south, some of the older prisons that have antiquated systems, it's hard for them to get it because their system is not together. But for the most part, out of the 35 prisons, all of them get it pretty much.
Yeah, it went up the chain. I mean, it wasn't getting played in all the prisons. Earlonne, I think I'm remembering this correctly. And basically, I don't know who told somebody they had to play it. So it was.
I mean, we ran into Scott Button. No, not Scott Button, because Scott Kernan.
Scott
Came in and was like, "Well, why isn't it played?" Well, you the guy that can make that move.
He was the secretary at the time of the department.
I mean, if somebody in Sacramento makes that decision, you're gold. But if it's prison by prison, some of these places are a struggle. I'm going to get to both books. I just sort of started where we started. But one thing I've been wanting to ask you guys since the show aired, really, is just about the difference between San Quentin and so many other prisons in California. the show is super balanced. It's not meant to candy coat or sugarcoat anything. That said, San Quentin, even as it looks like this kind of clangy old 19th century iron and bars kind of prison that you imagine when you think about a 19th century prison, is not representative of what's available for most incarcerated people in California. And maybe because I live in Los Angeles, I think more of the prisons that people get shuttled to from here, Ironweed and Susanville and Corcoran and Salinas Valley, which for some reason is really the worst prison I've ever been to. But those places don't have a lot of programming the way that San Quentin does. And I wonder if you think about that, if you try to bring in people from those prisons so that you don't, give a sense of life and vitality, even as it's so wonderful to hear about that life and vitality without overemphasizing one prison that's not replicated in all the others.
Well, I mean, it's a trip because, everybody would definitely want the opportunity to, be involved in a lot of stuff. I think San Quentin is just one of those prisons where it's like real estate. It's location, location, location. It's in the middle of everything. It's around probably 5 or 6 different colleges. You know what I'm saying? That professors come and volunteer their time. So
Yeah.
uh,
And it's not level 4, so that
no, it's not level 4. It's level 2. Though it houses death row and all that, but that's pretty much separate from the general population. But I would say that it's just the location that it's in, and it has a lot of people coming in. But I know a lot of other prisons would definitely love to do a lot of the stuff that San Quentin does. And one of our missions, and Nigel usually she'll say this, is that we don't want to make it seem like prison is just cool, fun, and all that, because it's not. It's you do have situations where it get violent in some places. But I'll let Nigel go from there.
Well, I mean, I would also say, obviously Earlonne has the lived experience, but from what I've observed and from talking to a lot of people, there are so many programs at San Quentin because there's so many volunteers. And I think at other prisons, there's the violence, but there's also the immense boredom because there isn't a lot to do. And one of the things I hope Your Hustle makes clear is that a great way to think about reforming prisons is to have more programs where outside and inside people are working together as colleagues. That's really important. This idea that people aren't like shuttered away, and then people on the outside don't know what's going on the inside. So it's hard when a prison is in the middle of nowhere because I don't know how people get there. And so, yes, San Quentin does have way more programming than most places. And we would like to, now that Earlonne's out, we are trying to go to more prisons. We didn't want to do it when he was in. It didn't make sense. But now that he's out, we are trying to center stories in other prisons. But we also don't want to just drop into a prison. The thing that works about San Quentin is we're like embedded in there.
Yeah.
So that's the big challenge, is to create good relationships with people inside other prisons. And I don't know if we can ever replicate Your Hustle, but try to tell those kinds of stories there.
You've done some stuff with women, I've noticed. Some stuff about Chowchilla or people formerly in Chowchilla. I'm guessing that you would probably want to do more of that.
Definitely. It's getting in. We stay. I mean, the last episode of our last season was 50 different phone calls with Leslie Van Houten. And that was in a CIW, California Institution for Women, and it was just figuring out a creative way or workaround or whatever to get inside of a women's prison,
And we were supposed to be going, but COVID, screwed everything up. And so we haven't been able to get in. We're supposed to go in November, I'm not sure, to CIW. I don't know if it's going to work, but next season, if all goes well, we'll be spending more time down there. Because I do feel like our show has been very male-centric out of necessity. And I really want to rectify that. I mean, so does Earlonne.
Yeah. I mean, 95% of people in prison are men, but that 5% is half the population. And they do suffer in particular ways, but also have, so many specific stories to tell. Listening to the last episode about Bonnaroo, which I interpret to be like dressing fly, dressing up. I was remembering people telling me about weddings at Chowchilla where they make wedding gowns out of toilet paper because you can roll it into like these fluttering skirt hems. And anyway, female creativity. I loved that interview with Leslie Van Houten, and actually I'd wanted to ask you about it. I know several people who at different times felt very close to her, because anybody who's ever spent time at CIW has gotten to know Leslie Van Houten, because she's very much of an elder there. That's what I was always told. Like, she's a convict, but meant in the highest complimentary way, meaning like minds her own business, but is totally respectful to everybody. And one thing about the interview I noticed in the transcript is that you don't use her last name.
Oh, I
Didn't
don't
notice that.
know. We didn't, there's nowhere we say her name. We weren't hiding
I
it.
don't know. I'm not sure.
But then you mentioned Charles Manson, so I figured you weren't really hiding it.
Well, we weren't hiding it, because we do mention who she is and what she was involved in. And we say well, we wait about 10 minutes into the episode because we wanted people to get to know her. And then we reveal who she is. And we do talk about the crime minimally, because really what we wanted to talk to her about is, what is it like to have spent 50 years in prison? 50 fucking years. I mean, it's just shocking. And so that was really what the story was about. What was how did she experience these 5 decades? But we do talk about it. And I don't know why it's not in the transcript, but I know we do say her name.
Now you guys have a certain kind of in with Jerry Brown. I mean, I know he's no longer the governor, but he's commuted many of my friends, and I know he commuted Earlonne. When you talked to him, I don't know if he was maybe he was already not governor any longer. Because I'm gonna say
He was on his last leg.
Okay, because he, I mean, the fact that he and Gavin Newsom have both denied her parole is it leads me to believe there isn't a whole lot of hope. Like they somehow have decided that this one case, I don't know,
is the crime of the century.
I guess so.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. She
goes aboard next month.
I read that, I think in November. So another person I wanted to ask you about is Curtis Roberts. And the reason I wanted to ask you about Curtis is that I met him in San Quentin, and reading the transcript, listening to the podcast, looking at it again, I realized, probably a lot of people met Curtis because he was one of the people who participated in doing outreach. If you go into San Quentin on a tour, Curtis comes out and he's only a couple years older than me, and he reminded me of kids I grew up with. And the story is just so, what? You're serving a life sentence for stealing two $20 bills out of a cash drawer? And I actually hadn't realized that he did eventually get out of prison, and wanted to ask you guys how he's doing now. And there was an episode about romance that he was included in, and he'd gotten married, and some vested accessories to that marriage were concerned it happened kind of fast. Can you tell me how it's going?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I was so skeptical about him getting married. I was really concerned, and I was the doubter for sure. And I let him know.
Well,
but how's he doing, Earlonne?
I was the best man.
He was the best man. He was late to the wedding too.
45 minutes late.
45 minutes late to the wedding. He's never late to anything. They had to wait for Earlonne to show up.
I thought it was close to San Quentin, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Now he's doing great. I just had a conversation with Curtis maybe about a month ago. He just moved to Chicago.
Yeah.
So
he's happily married. It worked out really well.
Happily married. Him and his wife moved on. Bought a nice house in Chicago. He's no longer on parole. He was commuted.
Ordained minister, right? He's an ordained minister.
He's an ordained minister. He was ministering at a church, but he's now in Chicago and enjoying his life. I haven't talked to him in a few weeks, but I'm sure we'll tap in within the next week or so.
Yeah. No, he's doing really well. And I don't know, Rachel, how well you remember his physicality, but inside prison, he was really tiny and took up such a small amount of space. He was a kind of person that knew how to disappear. He's changed so much. Like he's much more robust and like louder, and you just notice him now. So he's just blossomed in so many ways. And has a really good relationship with his wife.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I remember that he was very slight.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I remember him very vividly. Um, so I read that um, to date, Ear Hustle has been able to hire everybody who worked on the podcast when they've gotten released. Is that really true?
That's the mission.
So
Yeah.
amazing.
That's
Yeah.
definitely the mission. It's just, and it's fun, working with the guys out here, as opposed to inside, So that's pretty much what we pride ourselves in.
Yeah. And it's because the podcast has grown. We've been really fortunate that we can sustain it. I mean, not every podcast can afford to have a crew of, what do we have now? There's 7 of us?
8 of us.
8 people. Yeah. No.
It also seems to me like I don't want to sound corny, but I talked to a lot of people serving very long sentences in California prisons, and a lot of people feel like if you are going to be quote unquote rehabilitated, you got to figure out how to do it yourself, and it's going to be kind of against all odds. And I kind of feel like what you guys do, the show, is a form of rehabilitation for the people who get involved in it. In a way, would you agree with that?
I
mean,
would.
Definitely, I would say it's definitely a new skill set, to become an engineer, a recording, doing a podcast. A lot of us started out in video, so when you have a prison that has a media lab that gives you that opportunity to learn stuff that people are really, really using in society, it's a benefit for the person that's there. You don't want to give that up or mess that up, because you can always go back to auto mechanics and learn how to fix a car or something, but
Yeah.
I prefer to stay in the media center.
Yeah, I mean, I would answer it in a slightly different way. And I think that I'm going to talk about rehabilitation in terms of respecting yourself and understanding your own creativity. I think whether you're in prison or whether you're out of prison, when you realize that you have and Rachel, this is probably going to sound corny, when you realize that you have the power to create and do something meaningful, your self-worth, regardless of your experience with incarceration, changes dramatically. And I think that's what Ear Hustle does. It's given people who work on it, including myself, the opportunity to understand the power that they have to make change. And that's a revelation for anyone to experience. And I hope in a small way that people that participate, not necessarily work on it, but participate in the stories, feel that way too. When they hear their story, they hear themselves in a different way. And I think that's really powerful. I believe in people embracing their self-worth in a critical and humble way. You know what I mean? Like not becoming arrogant jerks, but just understanding that they have something to contribute. So that's where I see it being a real rehabilitative process. But again, I would say that for anybody who can have the experience of creation.
I mean, but both in both senses, what you both say makes sense, like learning skills, but also being valorized maybe for having a hard-won expertise. Like when I talk to people in prison, I'm always so blown away by how much people know. And they are experts at something that many people are not experts at. So I would imagine that, having their knowledge treated as being valuable and specific and hyper precise is probably helpful. That kind of brings me to the San Quentin Project, which is, you guys have a lot going on. You have 40 million downloads. You have the new book, This is Ear Hustle. And then the San Quentin Project, Nigel, which is more you. You got a hold of this incredible cache of old institutional photographs from San Quentin, and then made this art project with people who were in your class inside. And I wanted to ask you about that experience, and I guess in particular, how that worked for people looking at these photos. Like I get the sense that they suddenly thought, oh, I can interpret this visual material because I know exactly what this is.
Totally. Well, when I started the project, I started going into San Quentin teaching a history of photography class, and I used this exercise of people looking at photographs and dissecting them. They were photographs by well-known artists. So I would bring them in, we would talk about them, and then I would give them to the guys to map, not unlike what I did in the archive project, as the way of saying like a photograph can be, anybody can access a photograph. It doesn't matter where it was taken. And an interesting way to talk about photography is to think about your reaction to it, and that your description of it is in many ways kind of like autobiography. And so when I got a hold of the San Quentin photographs, it totally made sense. Like, this is the way to discuss the project, is to have people that understand the images, explain them to me and explain them to people outside of prison, while also using them as a stepping off point for them to tell their own story, not just the story of the photograph, but their own story. And guys loved seeing these pictures. I remember someone said to me, "How can you make people inside look at these violent pictures? It's really not nice." Earlonne can speak to it because he was actually part of the group and he got edited out, believe it or not. The guy,
Well, that's
I know, can you believe it? And we're still really great friends. Sorry, Earlonne. He was busy doing other stuff. But guys loved seeing the photographs. Am I right, Earlonne, or am I off here?
No, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's historic. You know, none of us was there. Well, most of us wasn't there in the 60s. It was a cat or two that might have been there, but it's just interesting to see the place, to see I want to say how violent it was at that place at one point. You know, it was the most violent prison in the US. I remember I did a photo mapping, like she was saying, I did a photo mapping of a knife. It was just a knife under the door, but it wasn't like just a little knife. It was like, you know, and the thing I was mapping out was like, ooh, you know, I don't know if this was for protection or if this was a bluff, you know, like, look, this is what I got, leave me alone, you know? So definitely, I think individuals inside really enjoyed the cache of pictures, just like I think everybody else. I think it was interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it was definitely a precursor to Ear Hustle. I don't think Ear Hustle would have happened without me starting that project, because it was, you know, it was the first storytelling project I did in there. And it also told me, like, the only way to work in prison is to be collaborative, and to realize that you're not going in as the expert, you're going in and being a collaborator, not a facilitator, a collaborator.
Well, yeah. So a facilitator still, to your ear, kind of implies a sort of hierarchy.
It implies a hierarchy, and it also implies that I don't have something to offer in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a teacher on the outside, that's fine. I started as a teacher inside. I didn't want to do projects where I was a teacher. I wanted to do projects where I was looking for equals to work with. And in some ways, you know, in many ways, I was more of not the teacher with the photo book, but that was definitely more like, in quotes, my project. Whereas Ear Hustle is our project. You can't divide. You can't divide it between us. It is me and Earlonne and other people too, of course, coming together as colleagues, as beautiful colleagues, and I love that. There's nothing wrong with being a facilitator. There's you know, it's necessary, but I'm not a facilitator in this project. I'm a collaborator, and I'm very, very clear about that.
Definitely.
Oh, I was thinking also with doing the photography project, that you probably learn as much from them as they do from you, so that term facilitator doesn't really apply, because it's not a kind of equal exchange. Like, the photos themselves seem ideal for that, because reading an institutional space, when there are probably parts of San Quentin that you've never been in.
Totally.
You know, there are parts of prisons that people are not really allowed to go into from outside normally. I mean, so I was thinking that probably allows them to say, let me interpret this visual material and I can tell you exactly what's going on there. And maybe that in a way could give people the confidence to interpret other visual material, other photographs.
Exactly. And there's a really good example, Ruben Ramirez, who worked on the project with me. He mapped quite a few photographs, and he mapped the cover. He did a picture that I've looked at so many times and still the way he wrote about it captivates me, beguiles me, impresses me. And it's a picture, and do we have time could I just show it? Because it's a really
Please.
important image. It's image number 3, Emily. I want to show the picture and then show his writing. Can you show it without, go back just one? So it's this picture, and it's called Stabbing in the Gym. And it's a brutal picture. I don't even know if the person is alive or not. It's, you know, a man being held up by these 2 arms. And then can you go to the next picture? And then Reuben completely transformed it by talking about this man as a fallen cathedral, a once proud cathedral that's being buttressed by 2 forces, one of support and one trying to pull him back into a life he doesn't want to live anymore. And for somebody to look at this image of violence and see it in terms of architecture and put emotion on that just stunned me. You know, and so I'm using that as an example of like really learning something from one of the guys that was participating, that there's always a very unusual way to look at a photograph and divest it of its violence while not taming it in a way. Like it's still a violent image, but somehow you start to see this person that is struggling instead of just someone who's been attacked. And you start to look at those arms in different ways, and you start to question, like, well, which one is support, which one is pulling it back? And so there's just a wonderful duality to it. So whenever I talk about this project, I always want to talk about this image, because for me it's the centerpiece of this whole project, that something so miraculous could happen. And Reuben, I don't know if he liked photography before he took the class, but by the end of the class, he said to me that after taking this class, he could now see fascination everywhere. And what a beautiful thing to come to, that even in prison, you feel you can find fascination everywhere, because it doesn't necessarily mean that prison is beautiful. It means that he understood his capacity to see fascination and to find things more complex and more interesting than he had before. Like, who could ask for more than that in life than to see fascination? So anyway, you can take the image down, but
You interview him in the book, and
Yes.
and he talks about that. And I was kind of picturing him free and taking pictures. Is he involved with photography now?
Oh my God. Yes, he loves photography. His Instagram is great. He does adventures all the time. Every week he does adventures, but he does something that I love, and he shares his pictures with me. I have a fascination for pulling things from drains. Like if anyone needs a drain unclogged, I love it. I love to pull stuff out of drains. He does too. And he sends me pictures of
I
all the
love to
stuff.
wash things down drains. Sorry.
So I have a collection of pictures he sent me of all the things he's pulled out of drains. So yes, he's still photographing. He also loves to find what he calls nests on the street, which are evidence of where people have lived on the street. So he photographs that, and he photographs the stuff that comes out of drains. He's an artist. He's totally an artist.
Since it's partly an Aperture sponsored event, I'm going to ask kind of more art esoteric question in terms of, I'm very curious what your standard photos that you showed them were, or if you had standard photos when you guys started to talk about photography and how to interpret a photograph, if there were particular photographers you used.
Oh, yeah. So
And was Danny Lyon among them?
No, nothing wrong with Danny Lyon, but I didn't show any prison pictures. It didn't show any prison pictures.
Well, I wasn't thinking of his prison pictures at all, actually, but that he's somebody who's done a lot of handwriting around and on photographs.
Yeah, it's
I
true.
hadn't seen a lot of that from other photographers, so I wondered if that was where that kind of formal idea came from, or maybe.
No, it isn't. No, I mean, I think about someone like Jim Goldberg, who definitely there's a lot of writing on his pictures, but I don't think that's exactly where it came from. I showed a lot of portraiture, and I always start with August Sander, the German photographer,
Right.
Because
Who worked in classifications, right?
Yes, exactly. And I loved talking about that with the guys, and talking about how if you look at his portraits, I believe you can intuit so much about the subject, who they are, who they were, what they were about. And so I use that as a training ground to help people trust their eye. And one thing about that I learned or I noticed of people in prison is they're super good observers, because to survive and do well in prison, you better understand your surroundings and you better understand nonverbal cues well. And that skill is easily transferable to reading a photograph because you note all the details. So most of my students were pretty damn good at it. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, just having done like readings in prisons, when standing in front of a group of people, I've never felt so unclothed by the people in the audience. Like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to hide anything from these people.
Good detectors.
So, Earlonne, you were also in that photography.
No, I didn't make the cut really, you know. I had to watch it from the outside, you know. I still participated in a couple of, I think I did 2 different mappings.
Yeah.
But no, the group was, you know, guys were into it, they were full. Before it even came out, it was full, you know. So I just did it from
So
the
it's
top.
tough to get into. So Nigel's really popular at San Quentin.
Yeah, I mean, it was something different, you know, and you know,
Yeah.
you have a professor over here giving her free time to just, you know, show photo mapping to individuals. It's one thing that I'm gonna call her out on right now, though.
Please do.
Nigel, I haven't seen that little pin drop in the dark room. The pin drop, it takes the reflection, turns it around through a little hole.
Oh, the pinhole camera.
I'm waiting on that one. I'm waiting on that one.
No, sorry, no, the camera obscura. He really wants to
Camera
see the camera.
obscura.
Okay.
So I'm just letting you know.
Okay. All right.
I'll see
All
that
right.
one day. Noted.
Yes. Oh, sweet.
But I think everybody was
actually do it in the room you're in right now because you've got the window there. Okay. We'll be done.
So how did you guys put together the book? Like, did you interview each other and then transcribe it? Because it feels very conversational more than it does written, which is, I think, a very good thing. Like, it's as smooth as the show is smooth in terms of these long opening, amazing sections about the two of you, each in your lives separately, and then kind of how your destinies joined.
That's so interesting you say that. If my memory is correct, that part, no, that we wrote those parts, like a real writer. Is that a fair thing to say? That's the only part where I think we talked some, but no, that was us writing. But I think we tried to keep it we wanted it to be conversational. But the rest of the book is from interviews and transcripts. Yeah.
Well, then you're both incredible writers. Both those parts, I loved them also because you kind of know that people want to know, your own background. Maybe since you're so often interviewing other people on the show, and also how the show came together. And then what about choosing the sections to include in the book? Was that really challenging?
It was challenging. I mean, I don't know, Earlonne, hey, how did you feel about writing the first part?
I mean, the first part was I think the first part was more of the I don't want to say the easy write, but it was, me going back down memory lane in my life, and what pieces and parts I wanted to put in this book. So that was fun, reliving that, and talk just glancing over how we both got to how I got to San Quentin. It was interesting, so I think we had of course we had a couple of great editors,
Yes.
Dominica and Lorena, but I think Dominica was really just like she was a great editor that kept me focused, because I've always been intimidated by books, and how individuals are able to righteously articulate something in order, and it's not scattered everywhere. So she definitely assisted in me just keeping my mind straight on something.
Yeah. And then in terms of what we selected that we were going to cover, we knew we wanted to dig into some of the stories we already told, but that we also had, like 80% new stories. So we just thought about topics like we do on the podcast, like what's interesting to us. And there was a section, I mean, I always say this about Ear Hustle, that it's not intentionally a political podcast. I mean, we are hoping for change in prison reform, but we are storytellers, not journalists. But there's a topic that's super important to Earlonne that we wouldn't cover on the podcast, because as I said, we don't do stuff about policy. And that's the 3 strikes.
Right.
And so there's a whole chapter about that. That was something that we both knew going in was going to be in the book, regardless of the rest of it. That had to be in there. And that's really Earlonne's chapter. I'm in it, but it's really Earlonne's chapter, and that was important to both of us.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask about that. That's a project, Earlonne, that you're working on. And is there some legislation coming up in 2022?
Well, so Monday, I just went and submitted the actual language to the initiative. And I did it kind of backwards because, you're supposed to have all your funding in place, and I don't. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to submit it because I'm running out of time. But now I'm going to collect more of the signature gathering funding. So I'm on a mission to try to repeal California 3 strikes law in 2022. It'll be on the ballot, hopefully in front of the people, so they can, choose whether or not they want it on the books. And I'm
Like repeal it altogether, because there's a proposition that passed that allows people to have their third
a few years
strike.
ago in 2012, Mike Romano, I think it was the Stanford Law Group, they put up an initiative which amended it to where your third strike couldn't have been non-violent, like stealing a pizza and stuff like that. So
right, that's what I'm thinking of, because I know
it was
people
amended,
got out.
but a lot of people think that amendment actually repealed the whole law, but it didn't. It just amended it. So you have a lot of people that's just like me, and like a lot of my partners that then got out, that's just sitting there languishing away, wanting to, get out and become, a part of this community and assist in this community. Because everybody that I know that's out here that got out either from 3 strikes or was commuted, they're out here in the communities doing great work, giving back to the community, So my whole thing is that you have a lot of people like me, a lot of people like my partners that's, getting out, that's in there, that's just waiting their turn, and their turn might be 50 years from now before they're seen by the board based on a mandatory minimum sentence. And, I'm trying to, encourage the public, like, it costs $80,000 to house each person. You know what I'm saying? And we have teachers out here that can't even live in the communities that they teach in. So, it's a trip, so.
And Earlonne, I mean, if Earlonne's sentence hadn't been commuted, he would have gone up for parole in 2028. And that doesn't mean he would have gotten out. He would have gone up. He could have been denied.
Yeah, I'd have just went to the board, and if I wouldn't have articulated myself the way that they deemed fit, then I would have got denied, for some reason. So.
Happens all the time, people getting denied. I've met women in Chowchilla, too, in particular, who both got their first and second strike retroactively for crimes where they had already done the time and then gotten out and committed another crime. But those were added because the 3 strikes rule wasn't in place. So there's so many elements of it that seem deeply wrong.
That's me. I mean, my first crime was when I was 17 years old. I was a juvenile, and this was in 1988, years before the law came out. Right. And when I got out, I was already a 3 striker, unbeknownst to me, So I was one of them dudes that I got a life sentence, and you have a couple of tiers. You have, if you commit 2 felonies, your time will be doubled up. A lot of people that's under the 3 strike law, they got a life sentence, never had a doubled up sentence, which is one of the components of the 3 strike law. It went just from a no strike law to, you have 2 felonies, whether it was 50 years ago, you got 2 felonies. So you just committed another felony for stealing, whatever. We're going to give you 100 years to life based on those past felonies. So. Yes.
I read the other day that the 2 sisters of Polly Klaas, whose father was one of the kind of biggest voices behind the 3 strikes law, that they are speaking out quite vocally against it and are for ending it. That kind of seemed amazing to me and gave me some hope.
And I met them too, and it was, I think they, one of the sentiments was that they was young. They didn't have no power to do anything when they were young, to say anything, speak out. They didn't even see it like that. And now that, they see it, that, how their sister's legacy is, that, you have a lot of people that's locked up serving life sentences. And, us that was sentenced under the 3 strikes, we looked at it like we weren't sentenced for the crimes we committed or passed. We were sentenced technically for the murder of Kimber Reynolds and Polly Klaas, because our sentences were the sentences of first degree murder, 25 years to life. So that's how, most of the people under the 3 strikes looked at it, and but yeah, they are against it.
I think it's very powerful, maybe what they're doing, and I like the idea of all you guys working together, and I'm going to be part of this too as a Californian and trying to repeal that. Some questions have come in through the Q&A thing, or at least one. Okay, this is like a paragraph, but I'll try to. I think Ear Hustle has been tremendous in terms of humanizing people who are imprisoned and in giving listeners some insight into what being on the inside is like. Do you have ideas about other ways people on the outside can get similar insights? Great that you are working on ending 3 strikes in California, Earlonne.
Thank you. Outside of listening to Ear Hustle?
There's a lot of things people can do, right?
I mean, if it's giving individuals insight, because I think we give, and you have it's probably a couple, but we do give insight on what life is like inside, and that was one of the things that really stunned me when we started this. I didn't know people didn't understand what was going on in the prisons. I didn't know they didn't have no, and I learned that people think that once you're convicted in court, it's over, everything stops, you just get put in a box and you just go on somewhere, but life goes on. So I don't know. What you think, Nigel?
Well, I just think if you want to know more, you put yourself in the situation to learn, which there's lots of volunteer opportunities inside prisons. Wherever you live, I would contact your local prison, local jails, and find out where you can be useful. I mean, that's how I learned. I didn't really know anything about prisons until I started volunteering. I was just interested. There's also a lot of work to be done with juveniles. Reentry is another huge issue of what happens when people get out of prison. And it's not, I don't think it's as interesting to people, but there's a big need there to help that community. I think once you kind of put the idea out there into the world that you're interested, you'll see opportunities come your way. Yeah, I mean, you'll just start being more cognizant of what's out, what is out there, and what needs attention.
Definitely, and the preventative, to prevent individuals from getting involved in this, and it's all kind of, like I say, I would say you can definitely look into your own communities and figure out what can be done there to assist.
Yeah, and then also look to what you have to offer. What skills can you bring, your strengths and skills to helping to whatever the situation is that you feel is unjust and needs attention. I mean, one of the things I learned from doing Ear Hustle is that individuals have more power than they think. If you're determined and you have tenacity, I really do believe change is possible. So,
and then the last, I'll say that I've always said that, people like Nigel and other volunteers, you, Rachel, is y'all on the front lines of public safety, because, you're going in and having these profound conversations with individuals, and a lot of them can be life-changing because people are really starting to see individuals for who they are. Yes, individuals may have made bad decisions in their life at one point, but, individuals are separated from that and now, working to be, of course, better individuals. So I definitely applaud volunteers and individuals that, just want to help, because it works.
Now we have a bunch of questions. From Julie, regarding the book of photos, will there be traveling exhibitions?
There was a glorious exhibition of this at the Milwaukee Art Museum. Lisa Sutcliffe was the curator, and I think of her as a co-creator of this project. She did a beautiful installation of the project. I don't remember what year that was. And then it was also at the Berkeley Art Museum. Nothing else in the works, though I'm totally open to it if anyone's listening is interested. I would love for it to travel. It's great that the book is there because that's an easier way for people to see it. But I wish there would be another life for it in another museum. Milwaukee was just a gorgeous installation.
I so wish I could have seen that. Yeah, Lisa actually was the one who invited me to write for the project.
Oh, she's wonderful. She's just a superhuman being.
She seems like it. This is an important practical question. Earlonne, how can we find out where to contribute funds to the campaign to repeal the 3 strikes law?
That's a great question.
Yes.
So we have websites. You can go to chooseone.org. That's CHOOSE, the number 1.org. And on there, we have an Act Blue donation account that sends the money straight from there to our ballot committee. That's pretty much one of the best ways to.
Maybe our moderator, Emily, could throw that into the Q&A or the chat. I don't know how
Yeah,
that works.
and if you can't remember that, Earlonne, don't you have a link on your Instagram?
Yes, you can go to my Instagram, Earlonne Woods, and I have one of those Linktree things that it'll take you straight there to donate.
Might be easier to remember Earlonne Woods than Choose One.
What are some new topics you guys want to explore? That's another question.
Oh man, okay.
It's definitely a lot. I think one of the new ones is we're definitely exploring conversations with juveniles. That's one.
Yeah, I'm going to be working on a story next season about hospice and dying in prison. That's going to be, I mean, it's, you know, a tough topic, but an important one. We're still trying to get into, this got ruined because of COVID too, a prison program where guys, they're called horse gentlers, that they work with wild horses. And I just love that name, horse gentler.
That don't happen.
It better happen. Because we got to get our executive producer, Julie Shapiro, out here, who loves horses. So hopefully we're going to be working on that. Giving birth and being a mother in prison, giving birth in prison, what it's like.
Which topic?
Yeah.
A lot of, we want a lot more. We want more stories dealing with women in prison in general, hopefully one season we can have, 5 of the 8, on women, because
one of my dreams would be to have Leslie be a co-host for a season if she's still in prison.
Definitely, but we hoping she get out.
Hopefully she's getting out.
Co-host out here or something.
But there's some other people who would make fantastic co-hosts at CIW, I'm sure. Yeah. In terms of the juveniles, do you mean like going into California Youth Authority and doing programming?
No, they're ending the Youth Authority.
Yeah, that's actually, it's like they are closing it, but they're going to keep some high security camps open, I believe.
Okay, yeah, no, so I mean, of course, the Youth Authority, but right now we're in like juvenile halls. Camp Sweeney's juvenile halls. So that's one of our missions, is to go in there and teach them how to do podcasts, how to engineer, how to, do stories, and at the same time teach them how to do a story while doing a story.
Yeah.
So
that's what Earlonne's really working on now, because that's going to take a lot of time, I think, just to build the trust and to figure out how to operate in there.
That'll be season 9. That's season 9 stuff. So I've always hoped that one season we have all our episodes done before the beginning of the season, and as soon as the season hit, we can just put them out there in the world and
take a break.
We've been probably 3 episodes in the can, and that was it.
So I'm realizing something somehow in a new way right now, listening to you speak. When you think about going into a place and doing a radio program there, that means not just going in and interviewing people, but really collaborating with kids inside that institution and people inside there, and they'll make the program with you. Definitely.
That's the whole mission, is to, teach them what we learned along the way. And even like when myself, Yaya, or probably Antoine or somebody, when we go into those type of environments, of course, we're there to tell our stories. We're there to give our testimony, whatever that is, about how we were able to change our lives. And, so we just have those mentors. We look at it from the mentor standpoint, to try to give them some type of guidance on how we got there. And I always tell them, I say, I used to be y'all sitting there listening to me like, man, you don't know what we went through. So I sit there and tell them, because I was that kid sitting there looking at dudes tell us like, man, y'all don't know how we live. So I enjoy that. I enjoy going and, having those conversations.
Is there a link that, is there some way that people can know how to contribute to Ear Hustle if they want to donate?
Oh, yeah. They go to just earhustlesq.com and there's a donation button there.
Definitely a donation button, or
Right on our website. Yeah.
also, if you're on there and you like the merchandise, most of the proceeds or some of the proceeds from the merchandise assist how Nigel got in there through Patton University. It helps individuals
Yeah.
get their college degrees.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Prison University, which is now called Mount Tamalpais College. Yeah, but it's easy to donate and we always appreciate that, of course.
and yeah, you can
Well,
definitely
maybe
find that on either one of our websites. Social medias.
Yes.
maybe it's a good place to end. I want to thank you both for being incredibly brilliant people who I admire and learn from so much. It's an honor to talk to both of you. And I hope a lot of people read the book. Oh, that reminds me. I did have one last question. Is there going to be a soft cover version of the book that people inside can get a hold of? Because my friends in prison, I can't send this to them.
Maybe, because
Yeah,
some of the prisons cut the cover. They cut the cover off.
At Chowchilla, they
prisons-
won't. They'll just send
Not
it
all
back.
prisons do it, but some prisons will cut the hardback off.
But maybe Crown should put a
yes.
special soft cover edition out that's just for our people inside.
Yes,
Yeah.
the plan is to do that. I think it's going to take about 8 months though before it comes out, but yes, it is definitely going to happen. There's no doubt. Yes. Yes. Can I just say it's been great to talk to you? I mean, I love your work. And so, I'm fangirling a little bit to have the opportunity to speak with you. So it's great. And I so appreciated when you wrote the essay for that book. That meant the world to me. So thank you for your care and thank you for agreeing to do this tonight. And we look forward to seeing you sometime in person.
Yeah, let's hang out when I'm in the Bay Area. I would love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you, Aperture, for giving us this opportunity to spend time together.
Yes.
And whoever's out there, I hate that we have no idea who's out there, but thank you everyone who showed up.
To the 65 participants, I think it'd be a good book to go and read or listen to it. I've been listening to it too.
Oh yeah, we did the
You guys did an audiobook also?
Yes, it was so
amazing,
fun.
I've been telling Nigel, I'm like, Nigel, you're a natural.
So
you're natural. You can have a radio show and people will follow the music show. She's good.
I don't know about that.
I second guess myself.
Well, we did it together, which made it easier. So.
I think it's quite fun. I do my own audiobook.
It was a good process though. It was a cool process.
Forces you to really own every sentence you wrote.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Well, everybody get both books. Listen to Ear Hustle.
Thank you.
Nigel and Earlonne.